We are one-on-one this evening with the Altoona Mirror's Neil Rudel. You also know him from Nittany Nation Overtime. We want to talk about Sandy Barbour's impending, I shouldn't say retirement yet, impending retirement. Neil, how do you think she will be remembered as an athletic director?
Well, I think Sandy provided 8 years of stability coming off a real turbulent time. And I think she's somebody that really was a strong advocate for the student athletes, for maybe the non-revenue sports. She didn't really have to make a lot of high-profile hirings. Usually ADs are judged in part by, okay, how they do with football coaches, and you didn't have to replace James Franklin. You didn't have to hire him. Cale Sanderson is in place. She has named a successor for Russ Rose. She did hire a women's basketball coach. And when you go back to that, I thought there was a lot of dignity in the way that they separated from Coquise, Washington. I mean, it was sort of a mutually agreed. It didn't get ugly, and I thought Sandy had a nice touch in that. She's also hired Micah Shrewsbury, who looks so far to be an excellent choice. So I think Sandy's legacy basically will be stability. Hey, she came down here and did our show every year, so we have a little bit of a soft spot for her. But she was also really the first non-homegrown product that they had hired as the AD.
Her critics are going to point to incomplete projects such as stadium renovations and infrastructures type stuff. Do you think that's fair?
Well, I think when they announced a lot of massive things, particularly with Beaver Stadium, you wondered whether she was going to be there to see it through. That's several years ago already. Phil Eston was her top right hand at that time. He also outlined the project and he left shortly thereafter. That's a project that is bigger than all of us. So they're going to have to plan not just the AD, but the entire university. New president coming in, the board of trustees. It would have been nice to see her see that through, but I don't know if it was really going to be feasible. She was under contract through next year. So in some ways, to me, the timing kind of makes sense. You have a new president coming in. There was a question of whether Sandy was going to stay beyond next year anyway. So I don't know whether it's fair that she didn't finish. She didn't build a brand new Beaver Stadium.
I think the timing is absolutely perfect because I do think with the stadium renovations, I think if you're not going to see it through from start to finish, you probably should get out before it gets too serious. Now, you've been around for a long time covering this team, been around this program for a long time. How does Sandy compare to past athletic directors?
Well, I think I touched on it earlier. She's the first one who has, first of all, she's the first woman that they have had. And I think she's really, one of the leaders most respected among the NCAA women's basketball, women's community in sports in general, female or male. But she was somebody who did not have roots at Penn State. When you go all the way back you have to go back more than 60 years that Penn State has hired an athletic director that was not, sort of grew up at Penn State, whether it was Ed Checkguy or Jim Tarman or Tim Curley. Everybody had sown their oats at Penn State, and that wasn't true with Sandy. And I think that gave some fresh eyes, and she stood for, like I said, I think there was diversity there and inclusion, and I think in that regard, that'll be part of her legacy.
We are talking with Neil Rudel of the Altoona Mirror. Neil, do you think she left this program in a better place than she inherited?
Well, yeah. I mean, it was in turmoil.
Sure. I
mean, her first game was over in, in Ireland, and she inherited, really. Dave Joyner picked up the pieces for a year or so. No, clearly the program was in turmoil, and I think the fact that she has lent a lot of stability and kind of righted the ship in that regard. Clearly the program now, you're coming off two definitely disappointing, particularly this year, football seasons. And I do think it's, we'll see how it all pans out with James Franklin's long extension, because Sandy is tied to that. But yeah, clearly the program across the board is on much more solid ground than it was.
My last question for you, Neil. What direction do you think Penn State goes in now? And what do you think will be the key items on the checklist for the next person coming in?
Well, you have a new president coming in. I think the big thing is what's going to happen to Beaver Stadium. Are you going to renovate it, or are you going to build new? That's one of the questions on the survey that they're conducting now among their fans. I think that's a real big deal because that's a lot of the connection that most of us have with Penn State football. So I think that'll be high on the priority list. And how much, again, this is the first that you've had, a non-Penn Stater in that position. Which direction do they go? Do they reach to the past, somebody that may have some having been at Penn State, or somebody with Big Ten experience, which Sandy had also. So I don't know which direction they'll go because you don't have a feel for what the new president might think yet.
He's Neil Rudel from the Altoona Mirror and Nittany Nation Overtime. Neil, thanks for coming on.
Thanks, Andrew.